So, hey, it's John with Scottsdale Living. I'm here with my favorite dude, Chef Josepeh A Lerner from Curate Cuisine.
Hello, good morning.
Hey, morning, buddy. Thanks for coming. So this is going to be our first podcast, so we officially do in the podcast room here at the building. We think we've got everything dialed in, but you never know, man. Hopefully it works out
Yeah,
well.
we'll see. We'll see what you need or what you don't need.
100%. Yeah. So we got, again, Chef Joe from Curate Cuisine. So I first met Joe, man, I think during COVID, right?
It was.
Yeah. So during COVID, Joe was doing, you were at the Marriott, and then I think they furloughed everybody, didn't
Correct.
they?
Yep.
Yeah. So he did, man, I think it was a gumbo or something. It was friggin' the bomb.
Yeah, it was just like a random request.
Yeah,
Like, hey,
yeah,
can you do,
totally.
Was it not St. Patty's Day. It was
Oh, it was Mardi
Mardi
Gras.
Gras.
It was Mardi
Yeah.
Gras. Yeah. Yeah. So did the red beans and rice, and Joe made a red beans and rice and gumbo. Friggin' bomb. And, were you already so Joe created Curate Cuisine, which is he's a private chef, comes to your house, knocks it out, does amazing work. But was that kind of the start? I mean, were you just kind of kicking that around?
Yeah, that was. So literally, being placed on furlough with the hotel company and stuff like that, I got bored, and
Sure.
I created Curate Cuisine, doing cooking classes in my house from the Nextdoor app.
Oh, wow.
And I started,
We hate Nextdoor, by the way. No,
right. It's a whole big ordeal now with Nextdoor.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of those things where I would post up weekly, like, hey, we're going to learn about Spanish tapas this
Sure,
week.
sure.
Who's interested?
Right.
And I would have, 15 people
That's
come
great,
to my
dude.
house
All right.
and then just set up shop and start going. And then I was like, you know what, this is awesome. And started, thinking hamsters churning in the old
Sure.
brain, right?
Sure.
One of the people that I had to come in, they were like, hey, can you do a private party at my house? And I was like, why not?
Yeah, no
So
doubt, right?
literally, Nextdoor app was the springboard to what
Sure.
I'm doing now.
Love it.
And then started, created a Facebook business page, Instagram
Right.
business page, website,
Sure.
things like that, and it kicked off and never looked back.
So when you were doing these 15 or 20 people doing the classes at your house, were you charging for them, or was it?
Yeah, very
Yeah.
minimal. It was $25 a person.
Sure.
And then once I started to see, this is something of interest, and then
Right.
I started to get a little bit more in depth with them. I could charge a little bit more, but
Sure.
it was, it wasn't sur la table prices by any means, and
Yeah,
plus it was more one-on-one with a good chef. But,
Totally, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's been a wild and woolly ride, to say the least.
Dude, fast forward 2 years later, you're pretty much booked, right?
Yes, booked
Yeah.
solid, couple months out in advance.
Right.
Not really doing anything this December, but
Yeah.
it's good to take a break every once in a while. But
Sure.
booked up until March, so can't complain with that.
Yeah. And we're just coming off Thanksgiving, so tell me how Thanksgiving was. So I know you did dinners for people that were custom ordered.
Right, for sure. This was the only holiday at the end of the year that I was going to be here.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a little something. I didn't want to go to anybody's house. I didn't
Right.
want to leave
Sure.
my house. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do Thanksgiving to go.
Mm-hmm.
Posted up, on Facebook or, Scottsdale Living probably about a month ago.
Sure.
And limited it to 25 meals and had this, package for 4 to 6 people.
Sure.
Had a package of 10 to 12 people, and then sort of it was up to you to choose what you wanted in your package.
Totally.
Long story short, about 16 meals into it, I was like, hey, this is crazy, ridiculous.
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
did I do this? But it was great. It was great. I was done by 3:45, I think, on
Damn,
Thanksgiving
man.
Day.
So that was a lot of prep beforehand, though, right?
Oh, it was at
Yeah.
least 36 hours straight.
Yeah. Oh, wow,
So
man.
no
Jesus.
sleep.
Yeah.
But luckily I had one of my other chef buddies from Sitio's Aluxa's table.
Sure.
He helped me out. We sort of split the the arrangement and things like that. But
So what'd you do for a kitchen? Because, how many turkeys did you end up cooking?
probably did about 15 turkeys.
Man, dude. So you did those all out of your house?
Yes.
Wow.
But the thing is, with the packages that I had, I offered 3 different cooking styles.
Okay.
So I had fried, roasted, and then smoked.
Oh, wow.
So good for me, it was one of those things where everything was sort of spread out
Yeah.
evenly.
So you had the fryer, the smoker going, and the oven all at the
for
same time.
sure, for
Oh,
sure.
man. That's great, dude.
But that was the easy part. The turkeys were the easy part to me, anyways. It was just all the sides, because
Yeah.
we had probably about 7 or 8 sides
Right.
that needed some oven time and things like that. But
Once you get the turkey all rubbed down and in the smoker or the oven, you're kind of good to go,
oh yeah,
right?
set it and forget it,
Yeah.
and then you can tend to everything else. But
Totally.
it was good. I reached back out to everybody that had one of those packages, and they were like, "Fantastic! Are you doing it next year?" And I was like, "I don't know yet." So, it was a
See how it goes. No
learning
doubt.
lesson to say the least.
So tell me a little bit about, I mean, I know you got a background from the Carolinas, right? So would you say barbecue is like your favorite thing to do, or what do you go for?
That's a good question, and a lot of people ask me that.
Sure.
Being from the Carolinas, barbecue is one of the staples
Yeah.
in the area. Where I grew up was about an hour and a half outside of Lexington, North Carolina, which was home of the whole hog barbecue.
Oh, wow.
So not a lot of places in the nation at one point did whole hog, and then it was literally, in North Carolina where they did from snout to tail.
Sure.
Smoking.
And that kind of took off, right?
It did.
So I mean, it's a national thing now. At
For
this
sure.
point.
So definitely it's in my roots. But if anybody had to ask me, what is my favorite cooking style or cuisine, it would be Southern.
Oh yeah.
You know, so your greens, your mashed potatoes, fried chicken, your smoked, pulled pork.
Some okra. And the mac and cheese, man. The Southern mac and cheese.
You gotta have the good mac and cheese.
Yeah, I think I had some shrimp and grits you did one time. Friggin' off the hook, dude. They're just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing. You got a little Cajun influence in some of that stuff too, huh?
Some of it for sure.
Yeah. So tell me about the Marriott. So that traveled you kind of around the country, right? Just doing different stuff.
For sure. It was one of those things where right out of culinary school, I was like, you know what, I want to get into a good career.
Sure.
And I'm not quite sure how Marriott got my information or vice versa, but literally after I graduated culinary school, it was 2 weeks later, and I was flown out to Austin, Texas, for a mystery basket cooking, if you will. So,
is that how they kind of test you out?
For sure.
Oh, wow, dude. That's a little terrifying, huh?
So it was sort of like, Iron Chef of
Yeah.
So they bring you into one of these properties, and then they say, okay, well, you have this shelf of items. You need to make X, Y, and Z, like an appetizer, a dessert, a salad, whatever.
So they're not dictating the menu necessarily. They're just giving you the stuff.
Correct.
And you go.
Correct.
So what'd you come up with?
You know what? That was so long ago. I couldn't even. The only thing I remember is I did a risotto.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was like it was a chicken risotto, and it had a little arugula salad on top. But,
right.
But that's about all I remember.
I love it.
But I do remember there was this guy, and this is funny. He was tourneing potatoes. So that means you take a little, red bliss potato, and then like you literally whittle it down to where it's a football shape.
Okay.
And it has 7 equal sides.
Right.
And I was looking at that guy. I was like, man, we did that in, the French culinary class that we had because it is French. And I was just like, man, he's taking like 15 minutes per potato.
Was the whole thing timed?
It was. You had 2 hours. You had 2
wow.
hours to do whatever it was. And, he completed it. But then, whenever we finished and everybody presented at the same time.
Right.
And the chef was like, tasting everything. This is great, good. They could have used that, whatever.
Sure.
He came to this guy's, plate that had these little football potatoes, and he was like, would you do this for a 3,000 person banquet?
Yeah, right.
And the guy was like, yeah. And the chef was like, yeah, you're not going to work for us.
Yeah, there goes your labor cost, man, through the roof. Right.
So I thought that was really funny because even like, back then they were just sort of looking at the bigger picture of like a labor perspective. But
of course.
This guy was, very proud of his tornade potato, but he didn't even make the cut. So.
Yeah, I mean, so if, from a single dinner at home for a family or something, great, right?
For sure.
But I mean, if you're gonna crank that thing out at a Marriott, dude, that'd be crazy.
Not at all. But yeah, that was like my entry point into the company.
And you got hired from that?
I got hired from that.
Dude, bro, love it.
And I started off as they called it a manager in training.
Right.
It wasn't really like, oh, you're a chef with Marriott yet. I wore the chef coat, but then on my coat it had my name, and then it had manager in training.
Sure.
So, of course, you go into a company like that, wearing that coat, everybody's looking like, oh, he must be a culinary school grad, and he thinks he's going to be the next top chef and things like that. And that's, sort of the vibe that was given off, as a manager in training. And I ended up in Houston, Texas in the very beginning.
So that's your first Marriott?
That was my first Marriott. Okay. So the Woodlands Waterway Marriott. And it was just, it was mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. It's not a very big property by any means, but they have a lot of banquet space.
Sure.
So my first week there, we were doing a cowboy gala of like 2,500 people. And my head was spinning. I didn't know which way was left.
So at that point, you're not in charge of doing the whole thing yet.
It was more like, you need to go do this. And
totally.
Everybody's delegating out to me. And I'm just sitting there like my head spinning. I don't know what's going on. There's somebody's grilling off like 2,500 filet mignons, and I'm just like, how are we gonna cook all these?
Yeah.
And honestly, like 6 months into it, the chef at one point was like, I don't know if you're gonna make it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because like literally, like that's a lot. You go from culinary school where you're learning like one cuisine like every 9 weeks to being not thrown in. It was my choice. But you're going into something that's a well-oiled machine, and like you're used to it, and you're going into it like WTF? Like, what is going on here?
Wow!
And it was mind-boggling just to see the production and like the volume, the sheer volume was the biggest one. But
so I mean, how do you balance that? Because I mean, it's a production line at that point, right?
For sure.
So I mean, what goes into the behind the scenes of figuring out that menu, saying, hey, we got to do something that's really amazing that people love, but we've got to be able to crank it out, right?
For sure. So in these larger banqueting hotels, they have this banqueting kitchen, and it's sectioned off in between like cold side, which does all the salads, all the fruits and things like that. And then you have hot side, does all like the hot foods, the meats and potatoes, the proteins. Then you have the bakery. So it's one big operation, but it's separated out, and then everybody has like a timeline they have to hit. But it's just nuts, and like the ovens. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah. It's got to be crazy.
You have like 20, 30 ovens.
Right.
And like you're piling in like 150 to 200, pieces of meat on, in one oven to cook within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you have a holding box that you put it in.
Sure.
And then so it's sort of like a cycle like that. You cook it, you hold it, and then like you plate it, you present it.
Totally.
And
so can you hold steaks, like mid-rare stuff like that? It works out?
For sure. Like there's temperature dials on these holding boxes.
Gotcha.
It won't go any below or any above, of this threshold.
So it's just kind of keeping it there. It's not cooking it still.
Correct.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's just all about timing and having everything in its place before you get ready to present or plate up and things like that. But it's like a symphony, if you will. Everybody plays their part. Everybody has their instrument.
Great analogy, dude. I love it. The symphony. That's killer.
But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where, of course, my head's spinning, and then the chef, and then like the assistant chef like sat me down.
Right.
Like this is sort of circling back around to like they didn't think I was going to make it.
Oh wow.
And in my mind, I was like, oh, they're thinking I'm doing good, and I'm getting a promotion.
I'm ready for
that. And I'm sitting there like that was young me, and I'm just like, this is great. I'm having lunch with the chef, and they're like, you know what?
It's your farewell meal.
Yeah, pretty much. They're like, you know what, Chef Joe, we're a little worried about you. And
sure.
I'm looking at them like they had 7 heads.
Right.
And I'm just like, what is it? What's going on? And they gave me this laundry list of stuff I needed to work on, and I was just like, okay, you know what? I take everything that you said, put it into action, and then go from there. But something like, I don't know what it was, but something in me just sort of like snapped.
Sure.
And then I was just like, okay, if this is going to be me,
this. Yeah.
I need to go on and do this like wholeheartedly.
Love it.
And that was like a huge turnaround. Not saying that I couldn't do it before, but I think it just took 6 months to really get acclimated with like what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I mean, just the pure amount of what the food you're pumping out. And I mean, of course, Marriott's a pretty well-known brand, so I mean, they're not producing junk, right?
Not
I mean, it's a really good product,
Of course, and they have their name behind it, and some of these big venues that they have, like there's a lot of corporate Marriott people in there, and they don't want somebody from that group to come into the GM and be like, hey, we had the filet today, and it was overcooked. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, totally.
And then of course it'll trickle down. Well, who cooked the filet? And they'll see.
They go down the checklist.
Yeah.
Dude.
Oh, Chef Joe did. Okay, cool. But it was that moment where I was just like, okay, if this is what I want to do, I got to kick it into gear.
Right.
And then it was I don't know, history after that.
So would you go back to that environment again?
I would say no.
No, yeah.
I would say no.
Just enough.
Yeah, it was, I put in a good 15 years with the company, moved to 8 different states in those 15 years.
Sure.
Worked outside of the nation a little bit too.
Oh, so where was that at?
I was in Europe.
Okay,
a little
cool.
Bit. I was in Greece. I was in London.
Oh, wow.
A little bit. So
that was cooking for Marriott?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yep.
Would you have to do regional stuff when you're out of country?
You know what? Everybody wanted a little bit of a piece of the USA, right?
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
But, 9 times out of 10, they knew enough about it to where they could sort of execute and things. But, they would ask, like, hey, is this close to, like, the way you do your meatloaf?
Yeah.
And we're like, I'm like, I wouldn't do meatloaf here. But,
yeah, right.
But, those stints were very short-lived and stuff.
Sure.
It was more just to get some accolades and things like that.
Yeah, totally.
But,
Good for you.
My bread and butter would be in the nation itself.
Yeah, of course.
But, answering your question, when I go back, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
There was a lot of man hours, a lot of like missed opportunities, a lot
Sure.
of family time that was missed, and
Well, I mean, you were geared up every holiday, I assume.
oh yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Doing buffets up to 1,000 people.
Right.
You never got off not unless you had something specific you had a request
Sure.
off for, or
Sure.
by seniority in that property. So it was one of those things where like you gave a lot to this place.
So quality of life got way better after you got out, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I can make my own hours, make my own schedule. I mean, I know what I have booked out in the next 3 months.
Sure.
So I can actually plan and strategically like go, visit somewhere,
Yeah,
go
yeah.
have a vacation and
100%.
like this December, going to Hawaii for 3 weeks.
Well, that sucks, right?
Yeah. So,
But you're thinking about working out there eventually, or no? You're just going to hang
visiting.
out. Okay.
Family lives out there, but I was like, what? I'm not doing anything for
Sure.
Christmas, not doing anything for New Year's.
Right.
I'm gonna go out there and just live it up with the fam. For
Love
a
it,
little
man.
bit.
That's great.
I couldn't do that if I was with a company.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, they'd still have you going.
for sure. But you know what? They taught me a lot of what I know now, so
Sure.
I'm very blessed for that. Met a lot of great connections around around the nation, around the world, just because of working with them. So it was a blessing and a curse in one.
So one part that's kind of a little mind-blowing, people might not realize this, but talk a little bit about like the numbers. So when you end up, you're at Desert Ridge Marriott, right?
Correct.
So you're running the show in the kitchen. What's the numbers look like on that? I mean, that's got to be hundreds, if not millions of dollars a year running through that process.
For sure. And the JW Marriott Desert Ridge is the second largest JW Marriott in the brand, in the nation.
Right.
So I guess in our peak year that I was there, we were doing about 42 million in food and beverage sales a year.
Right.
And a lot of that, it's not like it's steady year round. It's the summers are dead.
Jammed into friggin'
correct
weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
And then whenever it gets cooler outside, and
Here comes Waste Management Open.
Oh yeah, exactly. So and then plus we had the Founders Cup,
Yeah.
LPGA event
right.
out there too. But your business is in the cooler months, so it's
Right.
not like it's like spread out in between like month by month.
Oh yeah,
It's
you're
like
rocking all winter.
all winter, like your guns a blazing and things like that. But yeah, lots of volume, 42 million in sales, which equates to about an $8 or $9 million grocery bill at the end of the year.
Man.
So it's it's insane. But once you get into a property of that caliber, like as a chef, like I didn't cook that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was doing.
So you're looking at P&Ls and food costs and
Correct.
negotiating and hiring and firing and everything else, right?
Correct. And then just like trying to close business with larger corporations to come in, to give you their money. And that's
totally.
whenever I would cook for those special things.
Right.
But it was one of those things, and like sort of trickling back to like culinary school, there wasn't enough psychology in culinary school. Like they didn't really teach you the further up you go, the less you're going to cook, the more you're going to deal with people.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing per se, but it's just dealing with your staff and having to say, what, are you okay? Do you need time off? I know something's going on with your family.
Sure. Yeah.
And then that's what it was about. Like the further you went up, it was about managing the people, the stress, and their problems.
Well, it's kind of funny, analogy or relation, but I feel like that's the same way with small business owners, right? So they get into something that they love, they have passion for, and let's say they're really good at it, and the company booms, it does really well. Well, you're done doing the part that you have passion for, and you're back to running P&Ls and looking at employees and time clocks and insurance and all that other stuff,
Right.
So I mean, I can see a guy like you who truly has a passion for the food. That's got to be tough sometimes, where you're not really hands-on and engaged with that,
Right.
to that level.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and I always found a way to get involved with the food.
Sure.
Whether it was changing the menus and like all the restaurants seasonally, or showcasing something on the news.
Sure.
Which I had to do that many a time. Which that sucked because you're be up at 3 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. How are the news kitchens? Are they decent?
No, there's nothing.
Oh, really?
There's nothing.
Yeah.
It's more like, a news kitchen like has the setup.
So the whole thing's it's all staged,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So like I would bring things in and I would like plate it up.
Right.
But it would, I'd have a piece of chicken and it would be seared to where it was
Yeah.
golden brown. It wouldn't be fully cooked.
Right.
So I'm over there like playing with semi-raw chicken.
Sure.
Just plating
Yeah.
it up, making it look good. But,
Right.
their stoves and their ovens and stuff worked.
Yeah.
So you could heat things up in a pot.
But you just didn't have all the stuff you needed
Correct.
to operate. Yeah. So
Yep.
that's kind of funny. Yeah. So tell me a little bit, like so I know you've had some interactions in the last year or two with helping other restaurants kind of get rolling. Is that kind of a passion? I mean, do you enjoy that part or?
It's one of those things where and like this all goes back to the Marriott as well.
Yeah.
Like some of the properties that I worked at needed assistance, needed
Sure.
help. And I always found myself doing a bunch of that, whether it would be, food cost analysis, whether it would be like organizations, systems, procedures,
Sure.
just.
So you were a fixer.
I was a fixer,
right.
and like that's became a passion of mine.
Sure.
Not that all these places that have reached out or I've helped have needed fixing,
Mm-hmm.
but they just needed, a boost of getting going and
Sure.
things of that nature. But yeah, and around the area, I've helped out, a good, half a dozen
Right.
places just to sort of get going and things like that.
Sure, that's great.
From an outside perspective, looking in at some of these smaller businesses and stuff. Having the knowledge from a large corporation, it's easy for me to say, okay.
Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's okay, but that's why I'm there to help. Right?
Sure. Totally.
But it could be something as simple as a system of we need to rotate the food a little bit better as
Sure.
far as like old to new, new to old.
Right.
And
right.
we'll have the freshest of the fresh every single day. So it could be something as simple as that.
So do you see that as like some type of career option down the line?
I would say that would fill just a void of if I don't have any business.
Right.
I do like it, but if you have so many going on at once, then
Sure.
you feel like you're back in the operation again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
totally.
that's something that I've taken myself out of,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the operations.
Right.
I can deal with the headache just for a little bit,
Sure.
but I can't do it
Sure.
full time anymore.
Yeah. So the managing the people and who's sick, who's out, who's
exactly.
in. Yeah. Get out of that part. So what do you see going forward? I mean, what do you want to do?
Great question. I would like to expand to a certain degree.
Uh-huh.
I do have a handful of chefs that help me out and things like that, but we're not quite there to where I can sort of have them hired to where they do a lot of things for me. They can help do some.
So is that on you or is that on the number of bookings that you have? So I mean, it's tough to let go, right?
No, for
because
sure.
your name's on the door, your name's on
right.
the chef jacket.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. And it's a little bit of both, really.
Right.
I've built a rapport, I've built a clientele, I've built a name and a brand for
Sure.
myself in this area. And of course, it took me a good couple of years to do that. But a lot of the clients, they don't want anybody else.
Yeah.
They want me. But
Yeah.
even though I could train somebody to do exactly what I do, they want me. I don't know if it's the personality, I don't know if it's like, the aura that I give or put off or whatever it is.
Totally. Yeah, I totally get it. So it's like, I mean, Curate Cuisines a name.
Yep.
But Chef Josepeh A Lerner is the
Yeah.
is the brand.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
And that's where it's tough. Is
Right.
that I turned down a lot of business because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, I can bring somebody else to go, divide and conquer. You go take a party here. You go take a party, there.
Sure.
But there's still individuals that I've done that with, and they're still sad just a little bit. That
Yeah, totally.
I wasn't I wasn't there 100%, or
Right.
I was there for just set up or something like that.
Yeah. So how do you overcome that?
Have to push forward.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Just
sort
get
of-
it done.
You can't tip over the apple cart,
Right.
all in one day. So, the way that I look at it is I gradually sort of like put some other people out there, taking
Sure.
care of some parties. People will start to see, oh, he's just building out.
Yeah, yeah,
he's
totally.
expanding.
Totally.
So that's the plan where I'm heading right
Mm-hmm.
now.
I love it, dude. Good for you. So one thing that blows me away, and I'm really interested to understand this and hear it, but dude, you're so creative in what you bring to the table. Where do you get the inspiration? I mean, because I don't know, man. I look at a piece of steak and it's a piece of steak, but you come up with stuff. It's like, wow, man, how did that come out?
Right. It's just over time you get to a point where you're like, I'm tired of looking at a steak.
Right.
And it's like, what else can I do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Or you play around with it, or you present it a different way,
Sure.
right? But this I can attribute to having Marriott with me too. Is playing on their budget, right?
Yeah.
So I really wouldn't want to go buy a 72-ounce tomahawk steak now and be like, oh, what else could I do?
What am I gonna do this thing?
Right, and then like I sit there and like overcook it or mess it up or whatever it is, and then like I'm out, $100 some bucks.
Yeah, totally.
So working with them gave me leverage to utilize product that they would buy.
So did they run like a test kitchen, or was it location to location?
They did have test kitchens, but depending on the property, really depended on the type of team that you would have.
Mm-hmm.
But like at the hotel here, like I had a great team.
Sure.
I had a lot of people that were passionate, that love food, that love to play with presentation and things like that, and that sort of helped, open up and spark the mind to different ways of doing things. But it's all about research too.
Yeah.
It's just, staying current, trendy with what the food trends are, and, what everybody is doing as far as plating things. And, it's just, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, you go on all these things, and like there's chefs everywhere sitting there doing all this wild and crazy shit, right? And you'll take a little piece of that and then just sort of like put it into something, somewhere,
carry it forward.
Correct.
So what percentage of the experience? I mean, like you come to somebody's house and you're doing a dinner for 4 or whatever. What percentage of that experience to identify to the presentation and the plating versus the food itself? Because obviously the food's amazing, right? But I mean, it feels like the pictures I see of what you do, the presentation's mind blowing. And I mean, is that like people love that? I got to believe,
And yes, people, you eat with your eyes first.
Yeah.
People always eat with their eyes first, and that's why sometimes you'll get the expression, I was more hungry with my eyes than I was my stomach.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Visually, people are always going to eat with their eyes first. And I think that's what separates me from a lot of the other chefs, private chefs in the area, is that like I take my time, I take my passion and put it more into the plate than just the food.
Right.
The food tastes good, but if you put my plate against somebody else's and mine's sort of like wacky looking, still makes sense versus somebody's that looks like
potato, steak, broccoli.
Exactly. I can say, the value of mine is better than this one, because mine's a little bit more visually aesthetic appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is, this is just like your food on a plate. Here it is.
Right.
So and that's where I try to get a little bit creative with things. Because once I get into that mundane meat, potatoes, broccoli on a plate, I'm not going to be needed, and then they'll fire the next person. Yeah,
totally.
So that's where I'm constantly like trying to like push the envelope with what I do, and be creative and think outside the box.
So what's the line in your business? I mean, is it, and by line I mean, is it catering versus private chef, right? So I mean, it seems like that's kind of a fine line, but I mean, what's the number? What puts you over the top where it's no longer, the private chef experience versus just a production line?
Correct. And that's a great question, because some people consider me a caterer, some people consider me a private chef. And that's just for the sheer fact of, them seeing like some of the numbers that I've done on Instagram or whatever.
Right.
But for me, like a safe spot would be about 18 and under people.
Okay.
For private chef. But if it's over that, I would consider it more of a catering, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
Which I can do. I don't mind. But I like to be a little bit more interpersonal.
Yeah, of course.
So I can touch every person, every table, and just be there within them. For the whole entirety of the event, other than just in the back. Plating up and just like
at that point it is a production line, right?
Correct.
I mean, it's got to get out hot, and
Exactly.
it's got to get out there, and you can't have the one-on-one. So have you ever thought of like, or are you involving people in the like cooking classes? I know we've talked about doing something here, and would love to get that going. Have you done any of that, like in your, you go to somebody's house, you're making dinner for 4 or 6 or whatever. Do you involve them in the process, or do they not really want that? Or
it depends, and some actually request that, which is kind of cool. They're like, we want this to be like a learning experience. If you just show us how to make one component of the dish, or can we be involved in that? So a lot of people are interested in some of this stuff for sure. And everybody wants to learn. Everybody wants to be, the next best chef for their husband, or their wife or whatever. Or if it's just like a passion. So, I mean, teaching part of it is always in me to do in the first place.
Right.
So even if they're not asking and somebody just comes around and be like, hey, you know what, check this out. This is kind of cool.
Show them how it's done.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or, a lot of the meats that I do, I sous vide.
Mm-hmm.
And, a bunch of people don't know what that is.
Yeah, totally. Well, explain it to us, because I know a little bit of it, but let's hear it.
Yeah, so sous vide is just a cooking process to where it eliminates all the bad aspects of the cooking process,
Right.
whether it's like over or under cooking. So sous vide is cooking within water, a
Right.
water bath. You vacuum seal whatever it is that you're gonna cook. You can like season it if you would like, and then they have like the Nova. You have the Polyscience. You have all these other brands of circulators, and that's
Sure.
what they call them, circulators, because it circulates water. And
So what's the benefit?
even temperature cooking,
Okay.
the flavor profiles are like incredible because you're vacuum sealing this product, and it's
Yeah.
like intensifying, sealing in.
There's
the
nowhere
flavor.
for the flavor to go. Yeah.
Correct. It's not cooking out and leaching out into the pan. It's
Right.
like everything is just there, and you know it intensifies the flavor. It's a slow process of cooking. It's very gentle, and it just like it makes for an overall better product, in
Sure.
my opinion.
So I've had one steak cooked that way, and it was freaking fantastic, right? But it still had grill marks on it. So what is that? You're searing it at the end for the look or
Correct.
presentation?
Exactly.
Okay.
And you know, if you have like duck or fish or chicken or beef, and you're cooking it in water, it's going to have like this pale
Yeah.
outside appearance, right?
Right.
And again, you want to be able to, you know, showcase that product, and you're eating with your eyes first. So you're going to put it, you know, on the grill to get a nice char mark.
Sure.
And that's all you're doing is just going to get a char mark.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you're going to put it in a cast iron pan to get a nice sear
So it's just
on it.
purely decorative, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it promotes a little bit of flavor too. But you know, a steak, you're going to have a medium rare steak cooked sous vide, and it's going to be from the entire left side to the right side.
Yeah, which was crazy because I
Right.
had it. It's like normally you got the ends, you know, burnt ends, whatever. You
Right.
know, everybody likes that. Some people like the well done end or whatever,
Right.
but this thing was the same all the way through the
Right.
whole thing.
Instead of you going into a restaurant, then you just have the center that's
Right.
medium rare, right?
Right.
So that's like one of the perks about cooking
Sure.
in that method.
So what's that look like when you're going to somebody's house? Are you bringing all the equipment to do this?
Correct.
Okay, so you're just using like their stove or oven or whatever, but you're actually bringing all the rest of your stuff with you.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
And I'm schlepping it with me. I'm just
Right.
plugging it in, and and that's where it sort of sparks the interest. Of,
Sure.
oh, what is this? Is this
Yeah,
water?
totally.
And you know, it's one of those things where people want to know about it. And then 9 times out of 10, I can get somebody to, you know, order a Nova circulator from Amazon that same night.
Oh, wow.
Which I should be, you know, like a.
You need to get your
spokesperson.
page, like the affiliate
Right.
page on there, dude.
Yeah,
Totally.
for sure. So, you know, that's a cool process about it. But, you know, sort of going back to it, what you were saying, a lot of people are interested in learning. And it would be very cool to have something like that here.
Yeah, no, we need
You
to
know,
do that for sure.
The
Yeah.
the ideas I have for it too is pretty cool. Like even a wine dinner series that we could
Yeah.
have, not just
Oh, it'd
you know,
be
cooking
so
class,
freaking
not
cool,
just a
yeah.
cooking class, but you know,
So obviously in your positions at the Marriott, you got pretty involved with the wine end, I would assume, right? With the matching and the pairing and everything.
for sure. And
Yeah.
then built rapport with vendors.
Right.
They would actually come in and do some of the dinner stuff with me as well.
Sure.
If we were trying to close the business for Chevron Oil Corporation.
Yeah.
And you know their CEO was very fond of Cabernet Sauvs from California.
Right.
I could have one of my wine vendors come in and have, you know, 7
Sure.
Cab Sauvs, and
Yeah.
then they would be speaking to the wine while I spoke to, you know, about the food.
Yeah, and the
But-
pairing and the whole thing. yeah.
Exactly, but you know, I also learned a lot about the wine and stuff myself.
Right.
I don't know, just like food and beverage. There's just so many different
Yeah,
things and
yeah.
venues and routes, and you know, just I don't know. That's what I love about it. There's not just one answer.
Totally. Yeah, oh, yeah, 100%. So what would you, I mean, just kind of a weird shout out. So there's a lot of kids out there, you know, 19, 20, whatever. They're slaving in the kitchen somewhere. How do you get out of that, you know, being not necessarily in front of the oven, but, you know, production, you know, you're the sous chef and you're jamming it out for 10 hours a day. I mean, how do you get past that point to where you're a little more involved in running the kitchen and doing the whole thing, you know?
You know, and that's gonna be one of those things where I have to say is the work that you put into it.
Sure.
I mean, you have, and I've met, but you have those individuals in these establishments, I call them the steady eddies.
Right.
They're going to be in there. They just want to get a paycheck. They're
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
want to be, you know, just chopping the onions all day long, or
Sure.
working the grills, making the steaks all day long. But then you have those other people that like show a glimpse of passion.
Yeah.
But if I had to say a couple of things to them, it'd be like, you know what? Keep on pushing forward with what you're doing. Do more than what's requested of you, and that's the biggest one. And
Sure.
then, you know, make sure that you're making yourself known.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go up to the chef and be like, "Hey, chef, you know, I completed my task, and you know, before service, I'm gonna go help X, Y, and Z on their
Sure.
station and help them."
It's a little
get ready."
self-promotion, never hurt anybody. Yeah,
correct.
totally.
And that's what it takes. It takes, you know, the hard work, doing more than what's expected of you, and then just making it noticed.
Yeah, totally. So, favorite chef, Well, let me rephrase that question. If somebody's sitting at home watching this video, watching this podcast, and they want to cook something special for themselves, what chef or cookbook, chef's cookbook, would you advise them to go to and kind of give it a shot?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, right.
I have a lot of cookbooks, and I've looked at, watched, met a lot of good chefs too. But Marco Pierre White, not a lot of people know about him. But he was the bee's knees of back in the day, like back in this late 70s, early 80s, back in the UK in Leeds. But he was Gordon Ramsay's mentor.
Oh, wow.
Gordon Ramsay worked for him.
Right.
When he was a young lad. And,
Sure.
He was the one getting yelled at.
Right.
And, verbally abused. And,
Totally.
Marco Pierre White was one of those chefs that, didn't demand excellence, but demanded, things to be good. If it's not good, then it's bad.
Right.
So there was no fine line of, this could be okay, but it's not okay. It was
it's either there or it's not. Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Right.
If it's bad. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to settle for just this. But he's been one of those people that I've watched over the years, and he doesn't really cook that much anymore, but he still sings the same song.
Sure.
It's if it's not good, we're not going to serve it.
Right.
And if you don't put your love into it, it's not going to be good. So we're not going to serve it. And he likes to pay homage to the products in general, and let them be the star of the show without all these extra ingredients.
Yeah, totally.
So it was like a simplicity is bliss thing with him, and then it was like a good or bad thing. And that's what I liked about him is it was just, one of those things. But I wouldn't say for the novice or somebody looking to, get started in, the cooking to go look at him, because he didn't really have that many cookbooks or anything.
Sure.
But if I had to choose a cookbook, I guess to, help somebody get going, it would probably be,
hard question for you. I've
got a million cookbooks.
Yeah. Well, just from a personal side thing, I've been doing some Julia Child stuff lately.
Right.
And the food's amazing, and it's pretty simplistic approach to a lot of her stuff. And it's like, man, it's just mind blowing, how well you can do it just following her process or whatever.
No, that's true. I probably have the same cookbook that you have on that one. And that reminded me of The Art of Cooking. I forget who that's by. But there's the art of cooking, the art of baking, and the art of gardening and things like that.
Is it kind of like a Cooking for Dummies 101 kind of thing?
It is, but it's from back in the day. I forget the author of it and stuff, but it's one of those ones where it dumbs it down for you. And Julia Child cookbooks, she sort of dumbed it down for you too. Even though her stuff was French. Yeah. It takes a little bit more involvement, but it's simple.
Well, it's the peasant food, right? So that's having gone to Europe a few times. It's amazing. The stuff that's just mind blowing is the stuff that was all the peasant food. You know? And it's fantastic, man.
And you go to restaurants, and that's all you see is the beef bourguignon.
Yeah, totally, right.
And people are gonna pay a pretty penny just for that little portion of it too. That's the art of baking, the art of cooking. That's a good series.
Nail it. Yeah. So here's going to be another tough one. Hopefully you're good with doing this. But in Scottsdale or Phoenix, whatever, favorite restaurant, your absolute go-to place. It's not. throw me something that a lot of people probably don't know. You know what I mean? Something that you'd stumble on. And you're like, oh my God, that's mind blowing.
All right, cool. So this is a good one. I have a friend that lives in Peoria, and she was like, "Have you ever had good Israeli food?" I was like, "I've had Israeli food."
Sure.
And what I like about Israeli food is that it resembles Greek to a certain degree.
Right.
You have your hummus, you have your baba ganoushs, you have your beef skewers, you have your pita, things like that. But the way that we look at Greek food doesn't really resemble Israeli because we really didn't know that.
Sure.
So there's a place actually right down Scottsdale Road. I forget what intersecting road it's on, but it's called Fata Moranga.
Okay.
And it's Israeli. And it's just in this little strip mall, but it's 100% kosher. But you go in and you look at your menu and it's just Israeli food. It's got your tabbouleh salads. It's got your baba ganoushs, your
sounds freaking great, man.
Your hummuses, your fresh made pita that they make there.
Sure.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It is mind blowing how good it is, and I could eat there once a week.
I love it. What's the name of the place again?
Fata Moranga.
Fata Moranga. Okay, and it's here in Scottsdale somewhere. Yeah, Scottsdale Road.
For sure.
Love it. So yeah, I mean, we've taken up a lot of your time here today. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to throw out there before we hop off?
I got to do a shout out to Facebook and Scottsdale Living.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
This has been an awesome group, and seeing it progress from what it was, just like you've seen me progress.
Yeah,
I've
totally.
seen this group progress, and it's amazing what it is and what you do for the community and things
cool,
like
thank
that.
You.
You take your time out for, promoting businesses and things like that. Having me come in and just talk shit, shoot the shit about food and cooking.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, I like what you're doing, and I think that like trickles down with things like that.
Appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, it's good family aspect to it, and promoting small businesses, and we all love you for it. So.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. I'm trying to think anything really cool that we could throw out there. Let's do one more thing. What would you recommend to somebody? They want to make a dinner for their wife, anniversary or something, but they want to do it at home. They got a little bit of a budget because the world's jacked up right now, right? So what's a killer plate they can put together at home, do it themselves, but just have a phenomenal meal without breaking the bank?
You know what? Pasta.
Okay.
Pasta is super easy. Two ingredients. It could be 3, but it's so easy to make. You can get a pasta roller or a pasta crank on Amazon for like $25. But literally, semolina flour and water can make pasta. Semolina flour.
Dude, the fresh pasta versus the stuff in the box is mind blowing.
For sure, and it cooks in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
But make a pasta pomodoro. So a tomato basil sauce with fresh pasta. Call it a day. Put some pecorino romano cheese on top.
Killed it.
And everybody loves a good freshly made pasta.
Yep.
And you know the difference right off the first.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's mind blowing.
But that would be like one of the easiest things I could tell somebody.
Cool. Thanks for your time, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate it, man.
Awesome.
And that should be a wrap.
Nice.